As a music geek and former music composer, I must say that I love music recordings. It's a special place, whether it is a pro studio, a small studio, or even an impromptu studio you have in your home. It's in the studio that those iconic guitar riffs are recorded in the history books. It is where insane bass lines are crafted by chance. It's where a weird piano melody turns into a jam and that jam turns into the main melody. It is where songs are scrapped and new ones are born. It's where the music that is the soundtrack to your life is made and recorded forever. Man, I do love working in the music studio and I do love all the creativity that overflows those studios and musicians. In this episode, I will go over the basic studio gear, how is a studio on the inside, important music-related terms that I often use in music reviews, and more. All to prepare you for the next episode's look at recording music for Seiyuu and 2D music projects. Let's kick off this episode of Seiyuu Lounge. Welcome to Seiyuu Lounge. I am your host, Vanessa, and today's topic is recording Seiyuu music. The main themes are gear and studio. Recording music is a theme that I love to talk about, as I too have studio experience, and I love the atmosphere inside of a studio more than anything. Wait, I actually prefer more the atmosphere at a rock concert, but still, the creativity in the air, the candid conversations, the weird ideas that turn into memorable riffs and bass lines, playing around with lyrics, the whole production part and editing. Yeah, studio work for musicians and producers is awesome. So in this episode, you will come along and visit a recording studio for musicians. Spoiler alert, not that different from a studio in which you record drum CDs. And you will get to learn a little bit about the gear and the studio. For this episode, I will put all my experience in the music industry, also as a former music producer and composer, alongside information that I have been compiling over a decade about music production for 2D music groups and solo artists, all from Seiyuu and music magazines, variety, radio, and TV appearances. For purposes of this episode, you're visiting a studio alongside me. For those listening to the episode outside of YouTube, I thoroughly invite you to check its video version at the Hand That Feeds HQ's official YouTube channel, because I will be sharing a lot of videos and photos of gear and studios with you. 2 notes. Things will get a bit technical from here on, so if something feels or sounds too complex, don't worry, because I will give you a simpler explanation about everything. Also, Seiyuu Lounge or The Hand That Feeds HQ are not sponsored by any of the brands that will be mentioned in this episode. Now that you are on top of what will happen in this episode, let me guide you through the studio and production. Studio. In the studio, it's where all the magic happens. It's where that iconic bass line you love was created. It's where your favorite Seiyuu pours his heart and soul in his performances. It's where a band hangs out and creates unique music, sometimes on the spot. It's also where sometimes you might get writer's block while working on lyrics, or find yourself stuck while composing a song, and that damned chorus can't seem to sound good no matter how much you change the wording about it. The studio is soundproof and usually has good acoustics. The main room is where the mixing table is. This can be a really small one, with just enough knobs to cover the whole recording, or, in case the recording is being done in a professional and rather spacious studio, it can be pretty intimidating with all those knobs, buttons, faders and everything. Thing is, that is where things start to take shape. In the mixing table, the producer has every instrument tracked to a knob. They control sound levels, vocals, preamps, amps, and many more details. There's also a center console or usually a computer. That's where the recording will be saved in a session for prior editing and mixing and later mastering. By now, I've mentioned tracking songs, mixing, and mastering. Because some of these music production terms might be new for you, especially if you are not familiar with music production, I will give you a simple explanation on each. Tracking is the process of recording songs. Since each instrument is recorded individually, on the mixing table, that instrument is assigned to its own track in the mix. Isolating each instrument is the normal thing to do. If you spot any mistakes or the sort, only that part needs to be recorded again. It is also essential to balance instruments in the final mix of the song. You may want more bass or the synths to be toned down. You can do that individually because each instrument has its respective track and volume knob. So each track equals, with exceptions of course, to an instrument in the mix. Mixing consists in blending all those individual instruments, or as you now have learned, tracks, in order to create the best sounding version of the song you are producing. Mixing occurs in post-production. Some people say that mixing involves editing, others say that editing is its own process. In my experience, it is one and the same. While you're mixing, you may be editing. Why? Because throughout the recording sessions, you've managed to record multiple takes of some of the parts in a song by both the instruments as well as the vocals. Those may have different keys or a slightly different progression, and you save those because those might be useful to highlight a part while you're mixing. As a mixing engineer, you will have to choose the best performances of each instrument as well as the best vocal takes and put those together in the mix. Then you will fine-tune the sound, focus on panning tracks between speakers to give a spatial feeling to the listener, as well as balance the sound for mastering. While in mixing you are balancing instruments to get a great mix for each song, in mastering you are balancing songs within an album, putting those against each other to achieve a solid, seamless sequence between songs in a release. Mastering is what makes a song shine, in case of a digital single release, or a single EP or full-length album. If some of you have read my reviews at The Hand That Feeds HQ, I often go on about how the transitions between songs are seamless or how much I felt like there was a story going from start to finish. The mastering engineer ensures that the album sounds good and that the songs are put together in a way that, played from start to finish, the listener can feel a connecting thread between them. That is also achieved by tweaking the tops and tails of each song so that the transitions are barely noticeable between songs. Other way is by analyzing and tweaking the sound levels of each song so that there isn't one standing out too much in the middle of a release. An interesting note: I often go on about how impressive Soma Saito's Quantum Stranger is. It truly is a good album that I recommend you to listen to, of course, and it is among the best I've listened to by Seiyu, but there's a couple of issues that few have noticed. Overall, the mastering is not the best. Remember how I was telling you a couple of minutes ago that the mastering engineer focuses on making all songs in an album to flow seamlessly between each other? That does not happen in Quantum Stranger. There's an oddball that completely breaks immersion for those that 1. Are sensible to music, 2. Those that have music theory training, or 3, like in my case, mixing and mastering experience. Hikari Tatsuame stands out too much by itself, and within the album, it is the loudest song in sound levels alone that you have in the whole album. When I reviewed it, I mentioned that I did not like the mixing for that song, which is also another issue within the same song, in which the instrumental is too loud, almost completely covering the vocals. But if you notice, the sound is insanely loud in that transition between Rutsubo and then with Reminiscence Unplugged. It's not seamless nor smooth. It's quite the abrupt shift between songs. That could have been because Hikari Tatsuame was used as an intermission between themes within the album, but those that understand a bit more of the technical stuff in music production know that that song really didn't fit in the album. And worse yet, the mastering engineer didn't bother much with leveling the song within the release or send it back to mixing for a softer version that would fit the album. So yeah, that's a technical mishap that is on Soma Saito's best-selling album, Quantum Stranger. It's an awesome album, but far from perfect from a production standpoint. Still among the best produced albums by Seiyu. Don't get me wrong, I love the album, and by now you may have pretty much got the idea that I am a fan of Soma Saito's work. But the mastering in Quantum Stranger is subpar, whereas everything else is really well done. At the same time, one of the best, if not the best produced album by Seiyu is Toshiyuki Toyonaga's Music of the Entertainment. This album could have had issues, for example with Chase, which is an intense rock song with a blasting riff in the first seconds in the intro, but coming from Hana, which is a quiet ballad, and flowing into an acoustic song in Encounter, you barely notice that you had that intensity in the middle of both tracks. The mastering was really well done, making a song that otherwise wouldn't fit in the album, fit and not stand out like a sore thumb. The transition between Toshiyuki Toyonaga's Hana, Chase and Encounter is basically a ballad, rock tune and acoustic song. That's similar to Soma Saito's Rutsubo, which is acoustic jazz, Hikari Tatsuame, anisong type of pop rock, and Reminiscence, acoustic song. Although both albums were mixed at Sony Music Studios, among the best studios in Japan, the mastering engineers for each album were different, which is yet another interesting fact. I invite you to listen to both albums and check those differences in mastering. Also, you're getting 2 hours of great music to enjoy, so you have nothing to lose in there. Now that you've went through all these interesting bits of information, as well as some trivia in the mix, let's head to the recording booth. The recording booth. Imagine that you enter the recording booth. For starters, that room has good acoustics and is soundproof, meaning that you can't hear what is going on outside of it at all, and at the same time your performance is only clear to others outside of the room if monitoring using headphones or using the professional speakers, which are called studio monitors, which there's usually a set of 2 up to 4 on that side of the room. You find in front of you a condenser mic. These are really sensitive mics that are quite harsh on some plosives, which are the P's, B's, and T's. As an example, I record all episodes of Seiyu Lounge using a cardioid condenser mic. If you notice, at times my P's and T's are unintentionally enhanced. It's not that I said those with that intensity, it's that the condenser mic is more sensitive to those, as the P's, B's, and T's bring in gusts of air, which are easily caught by the microphone and can be a pain to edit in post-production. But condenser mics are awesome to record vocals because they are neutral and clear. The voice sounds as it is, without effects or enhancements. That mic in front of you in the recording booth has, in front of it and facing you, a pop filter. A pop filter helps you out to avoid those plosives to pass into the recording. You may have in front of you as well a sound shield, but usually the room has good acoustics, so chances are you don't need to bother because there's no need to have one in the recording booth in a professional studio. However, if there is still a lot of sound bouncing back, maybe because the wall is not fully covered in acoustic panels, diffusers and bass traps, it may be good to have a sound shield. In that way you get a warm sound with no feedback or echo. However, it does not have the quality that an acoustic room has. You may have behind or to the side of the microphone a lyrics stand. It's basically where you put the sheets of paper in which you have the lyrics, as well as your own annotations on what to put emphasis on, tempo, ad-libs and other details to pay attention during the performance. You may also have a mini console in which you can adjust the sound levels in your headphones when you're singing. The most commonly used headphones by professionals are the Sony's MDR7506. They're the classic headphones for recording and vocal monitoring, as those are also neutral with no bass enhancements or the sort and are really clear. Connecting the recording booth and the main room where is the mixing table is a window. It is usually not that big, just enough for both parties to signal each other during the recording or when giving feedback, for the producer to not only listen in the monitors what the singer is saying, but also seeing the singer and vice versa. While the singer is recording their parts, the producer is usually recording the vocals in real time using a DAW, Digital Audio Workstation. Music is recorded digitally, not analog like it was back in the 80s. So it is essential to do so resorting to software in which you can record each track for later mixing and mastering. In simple terms, the music you are creating and monitoring using the mixing table is being recorded onto a music production software. Music producers use Ableton Live, Logic Pro, GarageBand, or Pro Tools. There are other DAWs out there, but these are professional grade and the most used by producers worldwide. A side note, I am a big fan of Ableton Live. It was the DAW I used the most to produce music, and although a bit intimidating at first, it is fairly straightforward to use. What I talked about in this episode is the basics of music production. It applies to both regular music production and seiyuu music, whether it's solo artists, anisong, character songs, 2D idol groups or bands. The gear is the same, the studios with some changes between size and gear are almost identical, so you got a solid foundation to better understand and appreciate music beyond just hitting the play button and jamming along to it. In the next episode, I'll go into detail on how recordings for seiyuu music, be it solo, 2D music projects or bands, really work. You'll find that those are pretty different between each other. I hope this episode shed a different light behind the music you listen. There is a lot of work that goes underappreciated and unnoticed. That is exactly what makes the performances by your favorite seiyuu, as solo artists or part of 2D idol groups, shine. A good mixing and mastering are key for a good release. This is something that I pay a lot of attention in any review I make, more so than on the lyrics, which are a bit secondary for me because of how subjective those are, especially lyrics that are intentionally vague or layered with double meanings. And that's also due to how mixing and mastering are key that I have invested quite a bit of money, a couple of years ago, into good headphones for music reviewing. In my case, I use the Sennheiser's HD579, which are pretty neutral with good clarity and definition. With these headphones, bad recordings, weird mixes, masters, or weak performances stick out instantly, which leads to me being a bit harsher in some reviews because I notice those details. But enough about my experience. Tell me, were you familiar with the work that goes into producing the music you listen to? Let me know in the comments. If you enjoyed this episode and don't want to miss the Hand That Feeds HQ's weekly MailSeiyuu and music-related content, hit the subscribe button. I'll return next week with another episode of Seiyuu Lounge. Thank you for listening and see you guys around.